Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. This week we're looking back at 2024. North Carolina saw its share of severe weather this year, from tornadoes to hurricanes. WRAL's Aimee Wilmoth joins me to talk to us about all of it. Aimee, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, okay, if you had to describe 2024 weather in one word, what would it be and why?
I think I would describe it as strange. We just had some weird things happen that we don't typically see. Helene, we've had tropical systems in the mountains before, but nothing like Helene.
Right.
That was obviously a standout event. And then something that stood out was typically when we have tropical systems, we know we're going to have tornadoes. And we always say these are usually weak, short-lived tornadoes. Well, this year with Helene and Debbie, we had strong tornadoes. We had EF3 tornadoes, and that was also very strange. You don't see that very often with tropical systems. And then it's the warmest on record, so it's been a very warm year as well. So we had some interesting, strange, unusual things happen in North Carolina, and there were a couple of things that really stood out. Helene and Debbie, a couple of them.
Right, especially for us right here. And so how did that severe weather that we saw here in our area compare with what was going on nationwide?
I did some digging, and I found that we had 46 tornado reports in North Carolina total for the year, $5.5 million in damage done by the tornadoes and 2 fatalities. Compare that to over 1,800 tornadoes in the United States this year. So we rank kind of low. I think the highest ranking state was Iowa with over 150 tornadoes. We still had a bunch. In fact, last year we had 26 tornadoes. So this year we almost doubled that number. Unfortunately, this year for us, we did have 2 fatalities. Last year we didn't have any. Hate to see that, obviously. But it was definitely a rough year for North Carolina. As far as where we rank compared to other states, we had a lot of tornadoes, but there were several that beat us. I think there were about 5 that had more tornadoes compared to us. But then we had the tropical systems that had huge impacts in North Carolina.
Right. And you kind of found yourself at the intersection of one of those with Tropical Storm Debbie being at one of these deadly tornadoes. How do you reflect on that experience?
I think the thing that will always stick with me is the moment that we first pulled into that driveway of that home. We had checked out the school that had the heavy damage, couldn't see much. It was dark. The sun hadn't even come up. And so we told our manager, we'll drive around town, see what else we can find. And it was one of the first homes we found that was damaged. And we just pulled into the driveway, and I just remember thinking, "Gosh, this is so eerie." There were no people out and about. It was a little neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if someone had checked on whoever lived in the home. I wasn't sure if anyone was in the home. So I think that's what will always stick with me is just that first moment pulling in and just thinking how eerie it felt. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we found that someone did die in the home, which was a horrible tragedy. And I'm a meteorologist, and I'm usually in the studio covering those kind of things. I'm not out and seeing it. So it was pretty tough day for myself. And Jamie Munden was the photographer with me. He kind of guided me through the day because I'm not used to reporting things like that. I'm usually in the studio with radar.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely just a heavy, heavy thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
It has been good in the last few months to watch that community rebuild. I know the school has been able to get back on track and stuff.
And that's something that we always see in North Carolina. We work together, we rebuild, and, it takes the community coming together to really get things back to where they were and get things back in operating order, which, we're witnessing that in Western North Carolina with Helene and all the recovery taking place there.
Yeah. We'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. Let's take a break right there. Aimee, it's hard to think of 2024 weather without thinking of Helene. I think we're going to always remember that storm about this year, especially here in North Carolina. How are you reflecting on that storm from a weather perspective?
I think, we have tropical systems that have impacted our mountains. And in the mountains with all of the terrain, the rain gets funneled into certain locations and then it floods. But what was interesting about this is we had a front that had stalled days before Helene even got up here.
Right.
So we had 2 days of a stalled frontal system over the North Carolina mountains. It just rained and rained and rained. And then that third day was Helene. So you already had a ton of rain, and then you had the tropical moisture from Helene. So I think that was what made this so remarkable is, it was just really bad timing for a front to stall and then for a tropical system to move right into our North Carolina mountains and dump a ton of rain as well. So, one spot had over 30 inches of rain. And in the mountains where it's not flat and it can just run off, like in the coastal communities, 30 inches of rain is a huge, huge problem when it's funneled into certain locations. We had record river levels. I'll never forget the videos, and I'm sure anyone who saw it, of the homes just kind of going down the rivers. It was just unbelievable, and it was all because of that front that stalled days before Helene even got up here. Yeah. And just horrible impacts with the rain, the mudslides, and on top of it, you had the wind. Mm-hmm. So, it was just awful to see, and we knew it was going to be bad. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone knew it was going to be as bad as it was. I don't think anybody predicted it to be as bad as it turned out to be.
Well, and just the path of destruction. North Carolina being in the bullseye of that, but I have family in South Georgia, and lots of communities there were without power for weeks. My grandmother in South Carolina had wind damage. Augusta got hit really bad. Just on and on and on up to get there. And I think about sort of the event this kept getting compared to happened in 1916, which there just isn't really anyone around who even has a concept of that. Yeah,
and you think about a system that's making landfall in Florida, and you think, okay, Florida's going to have the biggest impacts. Well, no, it was us. It was North Carolina had the biggest impacts from Helene, and a huge part of that was because of all the rain that they had before it even got here.
Yeah. Well, now we're entering winter, just started. What is the outlook on snow this year, given all the strange stuff that we saw in the last year?
Well, I know a lot of people are wanting snow because we just don't get it very often anymore.
I know.
It's been a while. Now, we did have one little event in Moore County. We had a little bit of snow this year, but overall, looking at the big pattern, we have a La Nina that's developed, and typically with a La Nina, we have a drier, warmer winter. So that's kind of the pattern that we go by, and that's how we came up with our winter outlook, warmer than normal and probably not much snow. I think we went 0 to 2 inches of snow possible. So, it's been a weird year, so I'm not going to totally rule it out. But if you look at the long-term patterns and if you look at the past with La Ninas, it's not looking likely that we'll get snow this year.
Okay. Well, at least people have that warning ahead of time. Hopefully that softens the blow a little bit. Any other predictions heading into 2025?
I think that we're probably, this year for us was the warmest on record. And I think with La Nina and a warmer than normal winter, most likely, it could be the warmest on record next year, just with the changing climate patterns that we have and the warming of the earth. Other than that, I don't really have any huge predictions. I've kind of focused everything on my winter predictions and haven't even really thought about the spring and the tropical season. We're kind of glad to just be done with the tropical season at this point.
Right.
But hopefully it'll be a quieter year for us.
Yes, I think we're all hoping that. Well, thank you so much, Aimee, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.